I was standing at my own kitchen counter unwrapping a bouquet of flowers I had just bought for myself when I heard my daughter-in-law say, "Once she transfers the deed, we list the house immediately. That's at least 400,000 right there, maybe more." My son said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "And the savings?" She laughed softly. It was a laugh I had heard 100 times, a pretty laugh, a practiced laugh. Combined with the house, we're looking at close to 800,000. We just have to be patient a little longer. I did not move. The flowers were still in my hands. Tulips, yellow ones. I had bought them because spring was finally coming and I thought the kitchen could use some color. I had driven home early that afternoon because my book club was cancelled. Mrs. Peterson had a cold. I was supposed to be gone until 4. It was not even 2:30. I set the tulips down on the counter very slowly without making a sound. My son said, "She trusts me completely. She won't question it." And that was the sentence that stopped my heart. My name is Helen. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a pediatric nurse at a county hospital outside of Columbus, Ohio. I raised my son, Adrian, mostly alone after my husband passed from a heart attack when Adrian was 14. I worked double shifts more times than I can count. I missed things I should not have missed. I made sacrifices I never regretted because I believed everything I gave went somewhere good. That afternoon, standing in my own kitchen holding a bunch of yellow tulips, I understood that I had been wrong. The house I live in is the house I bought with my own hands. 3 bedrooms, a wrap-around porch, a maple tree in the backyard that Adrian used to climb when he was 8. I paid off the mortgage 11 years ago. It is mine. It has always been mine. And my savings, built slowly over decades of careful living, were mine too. Adrian had moved back in 18 months earlier. He said it was temporary. He and his wife Renata had sold their condo and were looking for a new place. They just needed a few months to figure things out. I said, of course. I was glad to have my son home. I liked Renata at first. She was sharp and stylish and she always complimented my cooking. She called me Mom, which I found touching. She brought wine when she came to dinner. She remembered small things I had said and brought them up weeks later like she had been paying close attention. I thought she was wonderful. I thought a lot of things. I put the tulips in a glass of water and walked quietly to the hallway. I could hear them more clearly from there. The kitchen and the sitting room share a thin wall. Renata was saying, "The key is the power of attorney. If she signs that, we don't have to wait for anything. We can handle everything on her behalf." Adrian said she's going to ask why she needs to sign it. Then we tell her it's for her protection. She's 63, her knees are bad, she just had that blood pressure scare. We tell her we want to make sure everything is in order in case something happens. She'll believe it. She always believes you. There was a pause. "Renata," Adrian said slowly. "What?" "This is still Mum we're talking about." Another pause. Shorter this time. "Adrian," she said, and her voice dropped just slightly, went quieter and harder all at once. "Your mother has $800,000 in assets that she is never going to use. She barely leaves the house. She clips coupons. She reuses plastic bags. That money is just sitting there. It's practical. It's smart. And it is going to be ours eventually anyway. Eventually anyway." I pressed my back against the hallway wall. My legs felt unsteady. I thought about the night Adrian was born, how I held him for the first time and thought I had never loved anything so completely. I thought about teaching him to ride a bike in this driveway. I thought about the 2 of us eating cereal for dinner the week after his father died because neither of us had the heart to cook. I did not cry. I wanted to, but something else happened instead. Something cold and clear settled in behind my eyes. I walked back to the kitchen. I picked up my purse. I walked out the front door as quietly as I had come in. I sat in my car in the driveway for a few minutes. Then I drove. I did not go far. There is a diner about a mile from the house. I have been going there for 20 years. The owner knows my order. I sat in a corner booth and I ordered coffee and I thought. I thought for a long time. When I got home that evening, I acted as though nothing had happened. Renata had made pasta. She was warm and attentive. She refilled my water glass without being asked. Adrian asked about my book club, and I said Mrs. Peterson had a cold, and he nodded and said that was too bad. We ate together like a family. That night, when the house was dark and quiet, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I have a financial advisor. His name is Mr. Calloway. He has handled my retirement accounts and savings for 12 years. He is not flashy, and he is not particularly warm, but he is thorough, and he is careful, and I have always trusted him. I sent him an email marked urgent and asked him to call me first thing in the morning. Then I found the name of an estate attorney. Her name was Ms. Varga. Her office was 40 minutes away. I made an appointment for the next day. Then I sat there in the dark for a while, just listening to the house. This is the house where I brought Adrian home from the hospital. The house where I hung his drawings on the refrigerator for years. The house where I sat up late on school nights helping him with history papers, where I cried alone in the bathroom after his father's funeral so he would not see me fall apart. This house was everything I had worked for, and my own son was in the next room planning to take it. I did not sleep much. The next morning I was up before 6. I could hear Renata moving around in the guest bathroom, the sound of her blow-dryer, the small rituals of a person who does not know they are being watched. Adrian came downstairs at 7. He poured coffee. He smiled at me. "Morning, Mum." "Good morning," I said. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and we talked about ordinary things, the weather. A neighbour's new dog. He was easy and natural. He did not look like someone who had said what he said the day before. That was what frightened me most. Mr. Murray, Calloway, called at 8:15. I had stepped outside onto the porch to take the call, pretending to tend to the potted ferns. "Helen," he said, "your message sounded serious." I kept my voice low. "It is. I need you to tell me exactly what would happen if someone held a power of attorney over my accounts." A pause. "They would have legal authority to make financial decisions on your behalf. Depending on how the document is written, that could include transferring funds, selling assets, managing real estate." I looked at the maple tree in the backyard. "And is there anything we can do to protect everything so that no one can access it without my direct in-person authorization?" Another pause, longer this time. "Helen, what's going on?" I told him. All of it. Every word I had heard through that thin wall. He was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Then he said, "Don't sign anything, not one document. We can restructure things so that any major transaction requires your personal appearance and 2 forms of identification. No one can act on your behalf without you physically present." "Do that," I said. "I'll have everything set up by end of day." I thanked him and hung up. Then I stood there on the porch for a moment, looking at my yard. It was a cool morning. The tulips I had put in a vase were visible through the kitchen window, yellow against the light. I had planted this life carefully, the same way I had planted those ferns, and I was not going to let anyone take it. Ms. Varga's office was clean and quiet, lined with bookshelves. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a way of listening that made you feel like she was recording every word. I told her everything. She wrote steadily and did not interrupt. When I finished, she said, "If they had succeeded in having you sign a broad power of attorney without you understanding its full implications, that could rise to the level of elder financial fraud. That is a serious crime." I let that sit for a moment. "Fraud," I repeated. "Yes." She said it simply, without drama. "We can document everything you've told me. We can establish a protective record. And if they attempt to pressure you into signing anything, we will be ready." When I got home that afternoon, Adrian was working at the dining room table and Renata was on a video call in the guest room. I made tea. I sat in my armchair. I read 3 pages of my book without retaining a single word. That evening, Adrian said, "Mom, Renata and I have been thinking. We'd love to sit down with you soon and talk about some planning things, just to make sure everything is in order. Your health, finances, the house." I looked up from my book. "That sounds like a good idea," I said. He smiled. He looked relieved. The meeting happened 2 nights later at the dining room table. Renata had printed out papers. She arranged them neatly in front of me and smiled warmly and said they just wanted to make sure I was protected. I looked at the first page. It was a durable power of attorney form with Adrian listed as my sole agent. Broad authority. No limitations written in. I read it slowly. All of it. I could feel them watching me. I looked up. Why is there no requirement for my personal presence to authorize transactions? I asked. Renata smiled smoothly. Oh, that's just standard language. It makes things easier so Adrian can handle things on your behalf without you having to make unnecessary trips. I set the paper down. This document, I said quietly, would give Adrian the authority to sell my house and transfer my savings without me present. The room went very still. Adrian said, Mom, it's not like that. Then what is it like? I asked. I kept my voice even. I had been practicing keeping my voice even for 2 days. Renata leaned forward. Helen, you've had a health scare recently. We just want to make sure that if something happens. I heard you, I said. Silence. 2 days ago, I continued. I came home early. You didn't know I was in the house. I was in the hallway. I looked at Renata first, then at my son. I heard everything. The colour went out of Adrian's face. Renata was very still. The deed, I said. The savings. 400,000 from the house, 800,000 combined, eventually anyway. I looked at my son. Those were your words. Adrian stood up. His chair scraped the floor. Mum, I can explain, then explain, I said. But do not lie to me. Not once more. He sat back down. What came out over the next hour was not clean or simple. It never is. Adrian had lost his job 8 months earlier. He had not told me. He had been too ashamed. Renata had been carrying them on her salary alone, and the pressure had become unbearable. They had debt from the condo, from a failed business venture Adrian had not told me about either, from a period of spending that had spiraled quietly and then loudly and then catastrophically. Renata said, I pushed for this. It was my idea. She looked at me and her voice was flat. Not apologetic exactly. Resigned. I convinced him you would never find out. Adrian was crying. I had not seen my son cry since his father's funeral. I told myself it was just temporary, he said. I told myself we'd pay it back. I told myself you had more than you needed and we were drowning. You could have asked me, I said. He looked at the table. I was ashamed. Shame is not a reason to steal from me. That word, steal. It landed hard. He flinched. I looked at my son for a long time. This man who had been my whole reason for working those double shifts. I was angry. I was heartbroken. But I also recognized underneath the betrayal a person who had made terrible choices out of desperation and too much pride. That did not excuse what he had done, but I needed to understand it before I could figure out what to do next. How much debt? I asked. He told me it was not a small number. I asked about Renata's parents. She had a mother in Phoenix. Her parents were not in a position to help. I asked if they had spoken to a financial counselor. They had not. Then that is where we start, I said. Not with my money, not with my house, with honesty and a plan. Renata looked at me carefully for the first time without performing anything. Why would you help us? She said slowly. After what we tried to do. I'm not sure I'm helping you, I said. I'm deciding what I'm doing. There's a difference. That night, after they had gone to bed, I sat in the same armchair I had sat in for 20 years, and I thought about what kind of woman I wanted to be on the other side of this. I had protected my assets. Miss Varga had my documentation. Mr. Berger had my documentation. Mr. Berger, Calloway had restructured my accounts. No one could touch anything without me present and consenting. I was safe. The question was what came next. Over the following week, I made several decisions. First, I told Adrian that he and Renata had 30 days to find their own place, not because I was punishing them, but because I could not rebuild trust while we were living on top of each other, and the imbalance of the situation would breed resentment in all directions. He needed to stand on his own. So did I. He agreed without arguing. That surprised me and also told me something. Second, I referred them to a non-profit financial counseling service. I did not pay for it. I found it and I handed them the number and I told them to make the appointment themselves. Third, I had a very long and very honest conversation with Adrian alone, without Renata. Just the two of us at the kitchen table like it used to be. I asked him when he had started feeling like he could not come to me. He thought about it. He said it started after his father died. He said he had felt, as a 14-year-old boy watching his mother work herself to exhaustion to hold the family together, that he could never add to my burden, that the role he needed to play was the one who was fine, the one who did not need anything. I listened. I did not interrupt. He said that over the years that silence had calcified into something he did not know how to break, and when things fell apart with his finances, the shame was so old and so layered that he could not find his way to me through it. So Renata's plan started to make sense, he said. I know how that sounds. It sounds like you let fear make your choices for you, I said. He looked at the table. Yes. I've done that too, I said. I worked so much because I was terrified of what would happen if I stopped. I didn't always ask you what you needed. I assumed providing was the same as being there. He looked up at me. I'm not letting you off the hook, I said. What you were going to do was wrong. It was a betrayal and it would have devastated me, and you know that. I know, he said. But I also want to understand it. Because I'm your mother, and that means something to me even now. He cried again. This time, I let myself put my hand over his. I did not forgive everything in that moment. Trust is not a door that swings back open the moment someone says the right things, but I cracked it. Just slightly. Just enough to let some air through. The day Adrian and Renata moved out, I stood on the porch and watched them load boxes into a rented truck. It was a grey morning. Renata stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and looked at me. I'm sorry, Helen, she said. I don't expect you to believe that yet. I don't, I said, but I heard it. She nodded. She got in the truck. Adrian hugged me at the door. He held on longer than usual. I'm going to fix this, he said. I know you're going to try, I said. That's enough for now. After the truck turned the corner, I went back inside and stood in the quiet house for a while. It felt large. It felt like mine. I went to the kitchen and I put fresh water in the vase. The tulips had given out days ago. I had bought new ones, pink this time. I had spent 31 years taking care of other people's children. I had raised my son. I had kept this house. I had saved carefully and given generously and trusted easily, and it had cost me. But here is what I had also done. I had listened to my own unease. I had moved quietly and purposefully before the damage was done. I had protected what I built. I had not let shame or love or grief make me passive. I was 63 years old. My knees were not great. That part was true. But I was not invisible. I was not confused. I was not someone whose time had passed. 2 months later, Adrian called to tell me they had a plan. He had a new job. They were in counseling. Renata had enrolled in a financial literacy course. He asked if he could take me to dinner. I said yes. We sat at a restaurant I had been going to since before he was born. We talked about ordinary things for a while. Then he said, quietly, Mum, I need to ask you something. I waited. Did you know, the whole time we were sitting at the dining room table with those papers, that you had already protected everything? Yes, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you lead with that? I looked at him across the table. Because I needed to hear what you would say when you thought you still had the advantage. He nodded slowly. He looked like he was turning that over. And, he said. And you flinched, I said. When I said your name and looked at you, you flinched. That matters. It means some part of you was not fully at peace with what you were doing. He looked down. I wasn't at peace at all. I know, I said. That's why we're having dinner. On the drive home, I thought about the word trust, how it is not a feeling exactly, more like a habit, something you build in small repeated moments until it becomes the shape of the relationship, and how when it breaks you don't rebuild the same thing you had before. You build something newer and more clear-eyed and maybe more honest than what came before it. I pulled into my driveway. The maple tree was starting to bud. Spring again. I sat in the car for a minute, and I thought about my son and his bad choices and his old shame and his slow turning towards something better. I thought about Renata, and how I still did not fully trust her, and how that was reasonable, and how it might change over time, or it might not. I thought about the woman who had stood in her own hallway holding yellow tulips, hearing things that broke her open, and who had decided in that moment not to collapse but to think. I was not the woman my daughter-in-law had counted on. The one who clips coupons and reuses plastic bags and would not notice until it was too late. I noticed. I always notice. And before I went inside, I sat there one more moment longer and thought about something my mother used to say when I was a girl, something she said so often it became wallpaper. The quietest person in the room is usually the one paying the most attention. I had been quiet my whole life. I had let people underestimate me my whole life. But I had also been paying attention, and there is a particular kind of power in that, the kind that doesn't announce itself until it is absolutely necessary, and then it speaks, clearly, and without apology. If you have ever felt overlooked by someone you loved, if you have ever been told that your age or your quietness or your trusting nature was a weakness, I want you to know something. It is not. It never was. Stillness is not the same as sleep, and patience is not the same as surrender. Like this story if it found you at the right time. Leave a comment and tell me what you would have done, and stay with me, because the stories I have left to tell are only just beginning. I have thought a lot about what would have happened if Mrs. Peterson had not gotten a cold that day, if book club had not been cancelled, if I had walked through the front door at 4 o'clock instead of 2:30, the way I was supposed to. I would have come home to a warm house and pasta on the stove and a stack of papers waiting for my signature, and I would not have known a single thing was wrong. That is the part that stays with me. Not the betrayal itself, but how close I came to never finding out. I used to think that trust was something you gave freely to the people who had earned it, and that once earned it was simply there, solid and permanent. I trusted Adrian because he was my son, and I had known him his entire life. I trusted that love meant protection. What I did not understand, and what this whole terrible year taught me, is that trust without attention is not trust at all. It is just hope. And hope, on its own, is not enough to protect you. What Adrian and Renata planned was wrong. I do not soften that. They looked at everything I had built and decided it was available to them, that my age and my quietness and my habit of believing the best in people made me an easy mark. That is a specific kind of harm. It is not just financial. It reaches into something deeper, into the place where you store your understanding of who loves you and how. But I also know this. They did not arrive at that plan in a single afternoon. It grew out of Adrian's long silence and his old shame and his inability to come to me when things fell apart. And my own part in that, the years I was gone before I was physically absent, the way I sometimes confused providing with presence, that was real too. Causes have effects. Actions accumulate. A son who learns early that his mother's love is expressed through sacrifice and exhaustion sometimes also learns, without meaning to, that the way you handle a problem is quietly, alone, by any means necessary. I am not saying that excuses anything. It does not. But understanding why something happened is not the same as excusing it. It is how you keep it from happening again. What I want to say, to anyone listening who has ever felt the particular humiliation of being underestimated by someone they love, is this: your stillness is not weakness. Your patience is not passivity. And the fact that you are trusting and generous does not make you naive. It makes you human. The error is not in having loved openly. The error would have been in staying passive once you knew. I moved quietly. I made my calls before anyone knew I had heard a single word. I sat across from my son at that dining room table with those papers in front of me, and I had already known for 2 days that everything was protected. I let him speak. I listened to what he said and how he said it, and what he could not quite bring himself to say. That information mattered as much as any legal document. Renata once told me that the money was just sitting there, that I would never really use it. She was wrong about that. I used every cent of it, not to spend, but to live without fear. That is what savings is for. That is what 31 years of early mornings is for. Not so that someone else can step in and decide your resources are wasted on you. I am 63 years old, and my knees are not what they were, and I reuse plastic bags out of habit, and I still clip coupons because it pleases me to do so. None of that makes me less. None of that makes me slow. The quietest person in the room is often the one who has seen the most. And when she finally speaks, she has already done everything that needed to be done.